my name is Karl Alvarez from Descendents and a whole bunch of other bands.
I'm David Silver from Season of Risk and the Indie Drummer Collective, and this is Drummers Talk with Bass Players. I'm here today with arguably the greatest bass player on the planet, definitely in every top 10 list of bass players. We know each other because, 1995 we did a pretty long tour with all Toadies and Season of Risk. Probably you don't know. 1987, I saw Descendents at Teachy the Bears in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it changed my life. It was the All album. It starts off with the rad song that you wrote, Coolidge. You can only be a victim if you admit defeat. I loved that whole PMA that was suddenly happening in hardcore, and Descendants got really weird, but also had that
Yeah, there's always been a positivity to that band particularly. There's a lot of bands though that I think that's what separated a lot of the hardcore bands of the time from the previous incarnations of punk rock, which had been quite nihilistic for the most part.
Yeah, totally. I grew up loving Sex Pistols and Buzzcocks and, listening to Crass and whatever, but suddenly Descendants, it was I'm not a loser. It was about being bullied, and I was suddenly, hey, this band is talking about stuff that's happening.
It was very, very real, this is happening in my life too. It was very easy to understand a lot of that stuff.
It's cool because you guys are all actual friends, unlike a lot of bands who kind of get a gig together and whatever. You and Stefan grew up in high school together. Milo and Bill were in high school together. It's that tightness comes through on stage too, and also being the tightest band in the world, you guys have an insane work ethic, rehearse constantly, and actually work at your craft. And
you rehearse so that you can cut loose live. I mean, that's really it. Once you get the set down to a certain level of muscle memory and comfort, then the stage show goes from there. That's the thing, is you practice a lot, and it is a discipline, so you can have freedom on stage. It's sort of our philosophy of it.
I'm so psyched that it seems like ever since Filmage, it's really people have recognized things.
Well, it wasn't like the mainstream was all that interested in what we were doing when we were doing it. We had the misfortune of kind of starting our thing in a period where the music scene we operated in was still very, very, very underground. And very small, which was kind of great because, like you said, you got to meet the people that you were influenced by musically, personally, and you got to know them on that level. For example, Bill, I had seen him because Descendants had never come out to Salt Lake. By the time I actually met the man, I had seen him play in Black Flag multiple times because they'd come through so often and we knew them as people. It was oh, okay, so now the guy from Descendants is taking over from, one of the prior drummers, whether it be Robo or who was the one they had out here, Emil. They had Emil out here on the Damage tour. Brutal drummer.
You had to suddenly learn a bunch of songs and play a show opening for Dead Kennedys, but were you already a bass player? How did you start playing bass?
I kind of had it on my mind from a pretty early point. I liked the sound of it, and I can remember as a kid very vividly listening to, on my grandmother's kitchen table radio, two songs that made an impact on me as far as what the bass was doing got me. And one of them, oddly enough, is Help Me Rhonda by the Beach Boys. That's one. And the other one is I Can't Help Myself.
But you played them on 45 instead of 33?
Well, that was not even on a stereo, that was on the radio. And I remember sitting there at my grandma's breakfast table, and these songs came on, and something about those songs was very compelling to me. And I Can't Help Myself, that bass part's still a template for how you're supposed to write a real cool bass part, And so, that got me interested. I didn't know electric bass really existed. Kind of out of the loop kid that I was. And at one point I tried to play upright bass, but I was about 10, and I had to stand on a stool to do it, which is humiliating. And then on top of that, to take it home on weekends to practice sufficiently to become good at it was very difficult. My siblings got really tired of helping me carry it home after about 1 week of it. And then my parents just decided, it's kind of a little bit of an expenditure to rent an upright bass because we couldn't afford to buy one. So it just kind of fell by the wayside. I didn't really pay much attention beyond that, but I was still a music fan. And when I was 12, I met Stefan, and music had already consumed his existence. And he kind of, over the years through high school, hanging out, he'd start a band, and I'd always be sort of the odd man out. I couldn't do much. I would carry gear, do what I could to be a part of what was going on. It was pretty cool. And then at one point, I started drawing flyers, and then still later, I joined the band I was drawing flyers for, which was, of course, Stefan's band. But it was, I always had that in the back of my mind that, I wanted to do bass. And a lot of the musics I liked had very prominent bass.
What's your favorite thing about a drummer you played with?
Oh God, for me, really, I like people who have a very creative, but a very on-beat kick drum. I follow the kick drum, and I try to position myself on any given stage in such a way where I can see what the foot is doing.
Oh, wow.
Because it doesn't lie. I mean, you see the kick go down, you know what's going to come, and light moves quicker than sound. So it's, kind of smart to do that. And yeah, I really like riding with the kick drum where the drummer really knows what they're doing. It's one of my favorite things. You kind of hook in with the drum part as a bass player, ideally, one way or the other, and that's where the groove comes from. You just watch and listen and see what they're doing, and then kind of hear what sounds are coming from where. And it definitely can color what you're going to add to it or subtract from it.
That's a thing that really happened a lot in the hardcore scene. Bass and kick drum locking in, like, to create that pony beat. And then at a certain point, some bands like you guys and Bad Brains and No Means No started writing different beats and changing what hardcore was until it was like proto post-hardcore.
That evolution's interesting to me because what I noticed is, okay, at least in the early phases of what I'm going to call, the American hardcore scene or punk rock scene, whatever it is, the drummers by necessity came from other disciplines of music. Yeah. They were straight rock drummers. They were hard rock drummers. Some of them were, they had the various thing that they brought into play. And I think that's where a lot of the originality of that early phase of bands, where that comes from, is they were coming from, like Spit Sticks from Fear was coming from a real hard blues, hard rock kind of way of looking at the way the beats work. And his breakdown of how you do it is different than, say, DJ Bonebreak from X, who was coming from a parade band perspective of all things. He was a marching band guy. And and played marimba as well, so he was very musical. But his attitude of fusing in all the cool rockabilly stuff, that's totally his thing. He brought in Lucky Lara from the Circle Jerks, was a jazz drummer, and boy, can you tell, he's all over the place on it. And it's kind of funny because I think Bill's one of the first generation of guys that didn't have an extensive background in other musics before he started playing with Descendents, because that was his first band.
So, most influential bass player?
In terms of our scene, I will simply say Mike Watt.
Yeah.
And it's it's about what he's playing, obviously, but the freedom that he is exhibiting within the framework of these, in the case of the Minutemen, songs that are a minute and less, it's very inspiring, and that stuff's pushed right to the front of the mix. It's naked, it's very, he made a big impact on the grunge genre.
Absolutely. Chuck Dukowski.
Oh, well, obviously, yeah. I mean, I'm a finger player largely because of Dukowski. I watched him do his thing, and like many other people back then, I was just kind of trying to, figure out what it was he was doing. Then I realized what he was doing is something you can't imitate, which is bringing that sheer beast of an attitude to the table. I can hit the strings as hard as I want, and I still wasn't going to get close to that level of thing. It's him. It's a personality.
Chris Kirkwood from Meat Puppets.
Okay, I mentioned him. I did an interview yesterday with Mike from MXPX, and I brought up Chris as an underrated bass guy.
Yeah.
Because album to album, I mean, he is, well, as close to perfect as it can get. When he does the nice country shuffle crooners, he keeps it tucked in. When he steps out beautifully. And then there's that whole Up on the Sun record, which is just crazy if you're a pick player. That is a template pick player record.
Yeah.
Because he had switched to a pick. He went from fingers to a pick between the two records.
Is the drummer bass connection important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It, I find that the personal relationship is reflected in how it sounds. So you have to have that there. And I've been very lucky in my life because I've had a number of great drummers that I've gotten to work with that actually, were very, very, very good people on top of it. And it's like, well, and very patient, thank God, in the early stages of when I was playing. When I moved out or came out to try out for Descendents, that was a kind of weird one because, yeah, I'd seen him play a lot, didn't know the guy well, and, got to the practice room. And I guess it was weird. It was sort of like an instant thing. We started playing together and it was like, wait, this is going to work. This sounds good. I think we could both kind of tell, yeah, this is gelling very, very well. And of course it helps to have been shaped by listening to, the 7 Black Flag albums and the then 2 Descendents albums, so I knew what Bill's drumming style was, but all the same, I like to feel like there was some kind of fairly deep spiritual, for lack of a better word, connection where it was like, wow, huh. Speaking of great drummers, Dale from the Melvins has always had a soft spot in my heart. I'd love the opportunity to play with him one of these days, but he seems very busy.
That's a good segue because the next question here is your dream drummer to play with.
Yeah, he's one. You and I have never jammed before.
No, that's good.
I like how you handle the kick stuff. The Season to Risk stuff, was very much in the air that we breathed as a band in that era. You're one of Chad's favorite bands, and so there's a lot of affection for it. George Hurley would be a lot of fun to play with because he's very inventive and creative.
I'm gonna put it out in the universe right now, but we need a record with you and Dale.
Oh, that'd be a blast.
What are you currently working on?
Currently the Descendents' new record, which we have a lot of songs in the can already but Bill and I have been very slow to uncork our songs. So within the next week or so, I'm going to start tracking my songs for the album. And we'll see what comes of that. I've also got an Endless Monster record that's been on the back burner. And back to the drumming thing, it's been backburnered because our drummer passed away.
Oh.
And Robbie Linder was his name, and he was one of the better drummers I'd ever worked with. I mean, and he was very much a Keith Moon guy, where he wouldn't play the same part the same way once, but it all somehow managed to congeal into something very, I can't say enough about this guy as a drummer. He was one of those rare talents,
Yeah.
And and he unexpectedly died, and it kind of, I think most of us in Endless Monster were just so broken by it that we couldn't imagine carrying on with another drummer initially, and then just the grieving process of great, we have a record, but it's going to be very hard to listen to it. I'm going to begin work on that record too, which is in the can. We just got to mix it and diddle around with it a bit, just to finally expose people to this group that I've been talking about that consumed my life for a very, very long time.
So I got to let you go. We got to keep this to the right length, but thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I can't wait to see you guys play again and hang out, and hope that this new Descendants record is coming out 2021, 22?
Yeah, that's the idea. We're going to try to get it out and get on the road again, assuming this whole pandemic fog lifts.
Yeah.
I'm about a week into my second jab, so we're almost all vaccinated, all of our band. So at least there's that. We can go out and play.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'll see you then.
All right. See ya.
You asshole Twitter troll.